Breaking developments from London. This is not being described as a protest. In this story, it is being called a revolt. More than 150,000 people have taken to the streets. Thousands upon thousands of citizens say they've reached their limit with what they see as Keir Starmer's immigration policies. The immediate trigger was a plan to house 600 migrants at a former army camp on the edge of a small town. Furious residents marched through their streets chanting Starmer out, demanding the proposal be scrapped. Tonight, that chant isn't just local anymore. It's echoing across the country. Because this isn't about one town. It's about something deeper. Anger that's been building quietly for years and has now burst into the open. Hit subscribe because we're breaking this down properly, and you won't want to miss what comes next. Let's take you to Crowborough, East Sussex. A place usually known for being calm and reserved. The kind of town where neighbors wave from their gardens and Sundays are marked by church bells, not shouting crowds. Until now. This weekend, 2,000 people filled the streets. Parents, pensioners, shop owners, all walking shoulder to shoulder. Their signs carried simple messages. Protect our women and children. Protect our elderly. Protect our town. These weren't slogans dreamed up by political activists. They were words rooted in fear. Fear that no one in government is listening. Fear that the country they recognize is slipping away. This wasn't a gathering of extremists. It was families, nurses, delivery drivers, people who say they've watched promises about border control quietly fade away. And what set it off? A decision approved with little warning by the Labour government to convert an old army camp into temporary housing for 600 asylum seekers. 600 people in a town where residents already struggle to get GP appointments. Locals say it can take weeks just to get through on the phone. Their question is simple. What happens when 600 more names are added to the list? Downing Street calls the plan compassion. People in Crowborough call it chaos. Watch the footage and you can feel the frustration. Homemade banners. Union flags. Faces red from cold and anger. One woman shouts, "We're not racists, we're realists." Another yells, "We fought for this country. Why won't you fight for us?" This isn't noise for attention. It's heartbreak. A feeling that decisions are being made in Westminster that treat quiet towns as places to dump problems that London doesn't want to face. While Keir Starmer talks about inclusive patriotism, the people on these streets say they feel excluded from their own future. They see open borders described as kindness, digital ID systems described as progress, and lectures about tolerance delivered by ministers who live behind gates and guards. Now pull the camera back. This isn't happening in isolation. From Kent to Yorkshire, similar scenes are playing out. Small communities facing plans to house migrants in hotels, barracks, and even former schools. Each time locals ask about safety, services, and transparency. Each time they're told to calm down, be compassionate, and trust the process. So they march. Because marching feels like the only way Westminster pays attention. Here's where it gets more complicated. The Labour government insists it is fixing the asylum system. Under the plan, refugee status would become temporary, reviewed every 2.5 years for 20 years before anyone could even apply for permanent residency. That's 20 years of uncertainty, 20 years of paperwork. And Starmer calls it fair and balanced. Fair to who? Balance for what? Even human rights lawyers describe it as legally unclear. Border officials privately say it would be impossible to manage. But Starmer presses on because it allows headlines claiming toughness on migration, without actually stopping a single boat. In this story, it's not reform. It's performance. Carefully staged to make it look like Labour has found a solution. While crossings continue and announcements replace action. You can almost picture the meetings, slides, buzzwords, phrases like pathways, review cycles, and community integration. Meanwhile, the only thing truly integrating is frustration with anger on Britain's streets. The government says the Crowborough camp will bring temporary stability. Locals ask, temporary for whom, them or us? And there's more. The protest didn't stay calm. When local politicians tried to hold a meeting at the community center on Thursday night, residents shouted them out of the room. Elected officials fleeing from their own voters. That isn't democracy working smoothly. That's democracy in distress. One councillor later admitted, "The anger was overwhelming." Another confessed privately, We underestimated how strong the feeling was. Underestimated. After years of being ignored. Every time people raised concerns, they were called intolerant. Every time they questioned security, they were told they were spreading fear. Now that fear has turned into distrust, Reform UK figures seized on the moment. Nigel Farage posted just 2 words, "Told you so." In this narrative, that short sentence lands hard. Every protest, every angry headline, feeds the idea that Labour promised control and delivered disorder. Downing Street attempted damage control. A spokesperson told the BBC that the Prime Minister supports peaceful protest, but warned against misinformation dividing communities. There it is again, misinformation. The word used whenever ordinary people ask why their towns are changing faster than anyone voted for. Halfway through this story, it takes a darker turn. Whistleblowers inside the Home Office leaked documents showing that at least 8 more military sites are being reviewed for conversion into migrant accommodation. 8. If Crowborough is the test case, the rest of the country is next. Starmer says these sites will relieve pressure on cities. Critics translate that as moving the problem out of sight. Each time it happens, another town feels blindsided and betrayed. This is the pattern described here. Shift the plan, move the location, wait for the noise to fade before the next election. But the noise isn't fading. It's spreading. At Prime Minister's questions, Starmer was confronted by a backbench MP, who asked plainly whether Britain still has control of its borders. The chamber went quiet. Starmer adjusted his tie, glanced down and spoke about complex global migration patterns. To many watching, that sounded like avoidance. Even Labour allies appeared uncomfortable. While flags waved in the streets and people demanded answers, their Prime Minister spoke in jargon. Meanwhile, Reform UK capitalised on every clip. Protest footage became instant campaign material. No slogans needed. Labour supplied them. Behind closed doors, civil liberties groups warned that Labour could next introduce a digital ID system to monitor work and residency. Officials say it would prevent illegal employment. Critics say it's surveillance by stealth, tracking ordinary citizens while boats continue to arrive. Is this about safety or control? History shows that when governments lose control of borders, they tighten control over people. And once temporary checks are introduced, they rarely disappear. Back in Crowborough, people aren't quoting policy papers. They're talking about everyday life. A retired nurse who can't get a GP appointment. A shop owner losing business as the high street empties. A mother who locks her door earlier each night because she no longer trusts promises made in London. These aren't radicals. They're the backbone of the country. And when that trust breaks, slogans don't fix it. Starmer's supporters argue he inherited a broken system. Maybe he did. But while ministers trade statements, the public is forming its own conclusions. The question being asked in pubs tonight is simple. If the government can't control the border, what else has it lost control of? Because every time citizens raise concerns, they're accused of stirring trouble. But perhaps they're the ones keeping democracy alive, by speaking when they feel unheard. Even as Starmer tries to calm the situation, reports emerge of another planned site in Lincolnshire. Locals there are already organizing. Posters are going up. Meetings are scheduled. Another protest is days away. And from Westminster? Silence, denial, reassurance that everything is under control. Thousands march because they've lost faith that Labour can protect Britain's borders. They chanted Starmer out, not out of hatred, but out of hope that shouting might succeed where ballots failed. If Starmer keeps ignoring that sound, it may grow louder. Because when people stop trusting those who govern them, they take to the streets with voices and votes. And that kind of movement cannot be spun away. The protest in Crowborough is not the end. It's the warning. Stay tuned because the next march might not just shake a town, could shake a government. Like, comment and subscribe because this story isn't fading. It's only beginning.